A defeated boxer will often evoke some of humanity's most brutal truths. Pain, disappointment, and usually humiliation are only a few of the intensely negative feelings that come with a loss at the highest level. These defeats are only made worse by the feelings that you have toward the victor. It is one thing to lose a fight when there is a healthy sportsmanship and no personal rivalry, and another entirely to lose to a person who you hate with all your heart. Thankfully for the downtrodden boxers that bathe in defeat, the chance for a rematch is almost always a possibility. Rematches have been around for as long as boxing itself, giving athletes the oh-so-sweet opportunity to unleash their revenge. That's why today we are going to be looking at 10 fighters who got their sweet revenge. 10. Don't let a fanboy get in the way. We have already covered Evander Holyfield's fight against Bowe on this channel before. Scratching your head? Does a man flying into the ring on a paraglider ring any bells? Thought so. Bowe versus Evander Holyfield II was one of the most hotly anticipated rematches of the decade in the late 90s, and was determining the king of the post-Tyson division. Bowe won the first fight in a great display of youthful confidence, landing 53% of his punches over the course of 12 rounds, and picking up a unanimous decision win. Holyfield lost 3 titles, and his hunger for the sport only increased after the loss. As the rematch went on, it began to be clear that Holyfield would take over. Despite Bowe doing well in the early rounds, by the 7th, it was Holyfield who was in control. All was going well, and he must have felt confident. What could go wrong? So imagine his surprise when a man piloting a paraglider crashed down from above and landed in the ropes. The man was beaten and escorted out, and after a 21-minute delay, the fight resumed and Evander would go on to win the majority of the final rounds. The match was billed as repeat or revenge, and Holyfield put the distractions aside and managed to get his revenge. 9. Hometown advantage. When Carl Froch traveled to Denmark for his fight with Kessler II, we're sure he didn't think he would receive his first loss. After all, he was 26-0 and looking better than ever ahead of his fight with the Viking warrior Kessler. But a hard-fought bout and some poor judging left him with the upset loss. But he took it well and stated that if the fight took place in Nottingham, the Brits' hometown, he would have been awarded the decision. Turns out controversy makes money, and there wasn't a big enough venue in Nottingham, so the rematch was scheduled to take place in the O2 Arena. The rematch was just as action-packed as the first, if not more so. But it was clear to all that Froch edged out the decision win, and he was rightfully awarded it. Surprisingly, there was no beef between the two men, and they stay in contact till this day. Ah, sweet revenge. 8. Sugar in the second tee. Up next, we have a pair of fights between the P4P King, Sugar Ray Robinson, and the Iron-Chinned, Carmen Basilio. Now, this was a time when a title fight meant a lot more. There were not 50 belts to go around for each division that act as mere participation trophies for those involved. The first fight was an upset win for Basilio, where he used his heavy pressure and high output to disrupt the rhythm of Sugar Ray. Perhaps the first fight wouldn't have been so competitive if Ray weren't coming up from welterweight to middleweight and he hadn't have previously taken so much time off. But what happens, happens, and the two traded for the entire fight, with Basilio being declared the winner. The rematch would take place right where the first left off. The two traded in the center of the ring and gave everything they could. A bitter rivalry had formed, and the two were expressing it with their gloves. At some point in the 4th round, Basilio's right eye began to give him trouble, and he struggled to keep up with the furious Robinson for the rest of the bout. With the last 3 rounds being particularly brutal for Carmen, it was another historic war for the pair, and despite being 6 years older and most definitely out of prime, Ray picked up the decision win after 15 rounds of hell. 7. Lennox is coming for you. Lennox Lewis is one of the few fighters in history to avenge all of his losses throughout his career. Not that there were many, but his most satisfying win was undoubtedly his second bout with Evander Holyfield. Almost everyone in boxing agrees that Lewis won the first match, which makes his second, more empathetic win even more pleasing, proving to the judges that he was the best heavyweight on the planet. He didn't have to prove it to the public. He already had in his first fight. He won the rematch by unanimous decision and became the first undisputed heavyweight champion in 7 years. 6. Plaster of Paris leads to the catacombs. No one could argue with Antonio Margarito's 11th round assassination of Miguel Cotto in their first outing. It was a brutal display and a war for the ages, with the final moments of the fight being particularly brutal. Cotto was a bloody mess, and thankfully his coach opted to stop the fight by throwing in the towel. But questions arose when photos of Margarito's hand wraps emerged and seemed to show plaster of Paris, a hardening cast wrap that would absolutely help Antonio hit harder. A rematch was set, and Cotto repeatedly accused Margarito of cheating, and Margarito repeatedly denied. The built-up anger was absolutely on display in the sold-out arena for the rematch, where Cotto utilized his jab and great movement to evade and parry the shots of the bigger man, before delivering devastating blows of his own. Truly violent stuff. The doctor stepped in at the end of the 9th round and awarded Cotto the win, after the swelling of Margarito's eye grew too large. Justice was served. 5. 2 for the price of 1. So far on this list, revenge has just consisted of one fight. Sure, some of the fighters on this list beat their opponent more than once over the course of their careers, but there was little malice involved in the final slaying. Manny Pacquiao's wins over Erik Morales were not an example of this. Manny lost their first fight by unanimous decision, a decent loss that no one could be mad at or fault Manny for. However, Manny was mad at himself, and certainly Morales too, who he went on to beat not once but twice in the year of 2006, both by devastating knockout. The third bout took Pac-Man only 3 rounds, seemingly accustomed to beating Morales by that point. 4. The Punisher is punished quickly. There seems to be only 2 ways for a rematch to end in the world of boxing. Another grueling war for the ages, or a lightning-quick knockout that makes you wonder how the 2 athletes were even competitive in the first fight. Sadly for Danny the Punisher Williams in his second fight with Sergio Martinez, it was the latter of the 2 possible results. The first fight had been back and forth and led to a controversial decision win for Williams, who wasn't too keen on the rematch considering the damage that was taken in the fight, and it was delayed multiple times. He was right to be unkeen, because it took Martinez just 2 rounds to obliterate Danny and end the fight. A rushing end to a long story.
That is the knockout of the year, if nothing else.
3. Bulk up, then Hulk out. Ingemar Johansson was a Swedish boxer who hit very hard. And we mean ridiculously hard. So hard, in fact, that his right hand was nicknamed the Hammer of Thor, and he used it to knock down Floyd Patterson 7 times in 1 round. He won the fight via 3rd round TKO, and was the first foreign heavyweight champion since 1933. This win may have got to his head, because he seemed nowhere near as prepared for the rematch as he did the first fight. He showed up to the weigh-ins almost exactly a year later looking overconfident and slightly out of shape, whereas Patterson, who training under Customato, the late coach of Mike Tyson, gained 8 pounds of muscle in a bid to weather the storm of the hammer. And weather it he did, before returning with a hurricane of his own. Right and left hands descended on the Swede, and he won the fight via 5th round TKO. Brain and brawn. 2. The return of the Bee. The first outing of Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier did not end well for the former champion. Ali's time away from the sport, as well as his brash overconfidence, met the skill and heart of Joe Frazier, and the cocktail wasn't a pleasant one. Ali lost by unanimous decision. It also didn't help things that the fight had become known as the fight of the century and had become a historical movement in the American conscience. The time away from the sport meant that Ali could no longer float like a butterfly with the champion gaining quite a bit of weight, but he could always sting like a bee. And that's what he did for a majority of the rematch when the two met again in 1974, 3 years after the original bout. From the moment the bell rang, Ali came out aggressive, throwing everything he could at Joe, who was a slow starter. When Joe began to take over, Ali resorted to clinching and flurrying combinations when he could. The fight was by no means Ali's best performance, but he certainly proved he could adapt his style to defeat Frazier and would get a unanimous decision win. He would fight Frazier once more, a year later, and this time it wouldn't go to a decision. Ali scored a 14th round stoppage win and certainly got the last laugh on his greatest rival. 1. Schmeling gets schmelted. Joe Louis is regarded as one of the greatest heavyweights to ever live. Most casual fans have never heard of the Brown Bomber, who held the heavyweight title from 1937 all the way to 1949. But he wasn't always destined to be the greatest. In 1936, a year before he captured the heavyweight title, he was knocked out in the 12th round by a German boxer named Max Schmeling, who was also extraordinarily talented and ahead of his time. Of course, Louis would go on to gain the title in 1937 and begin his infamous title reign, setting up a rematch. Now, we're sure you're wondering, a German boxer in 1938? A natural villain. But we are pleased to reveal that Schmeling was not a Nazi, although the American media portrayed him as such. The rematch took place 2 years later in 1938 and would be a far shorter fight, with Louis knocking out Schmeling in the first round, in what is considered by many boxing experts to be the most beautiful knockout ever captured on film. What did you think of these boxing rematches? Let us know in the comment section below. And be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Stay tuned for more videos every week. This has been a Boxing Central presentation. Thank you for watching.